Hey Elasmites, welcome back to the show where sharks and humans high-five and drink margs on the beach together. Thanks for tuning in today to listen as I, your host Sam McNeely, pick apart the mind of our guest. But before I introduce him, let's chat real fast. First, I want to thank all the Patreon donors who have given to support me and make this show possible at patreon.com/elasmospod. It really means a lot how much you're supporting me in this venture to bring great information and science knowledge straight to you, and it's the only way I can do it, so your support really does mean the world to me. Thank you so much, and again, you can find our Patreon page at patreon.com/elasmospod. I also want to thank all of those of you that have listened to the past episodes. They're all fantastic, and you should go back and listen if you haven't already, or just re-listen, like I've done about 1,000 times. They're fantastic, and I learn something new every time through. And also, I want to encourage you to rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it on, and then send that rating and review to me at elasmospod@gmail.com so that you can be entered into a drawing to win a fun prize from our guests from episode 1. And if you share this podcast on social media and tag Elasmospod, you'll get 2 extra entries into the drawing. And you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Elasmospod. And you can find our Facebook, the Elasmos Podcast, A Shark's Universe, on Facebook. And you can find us online at elasmospod.com. And also please send me your stories of diving or snorkeling or adventuring, boating, whatever. Because I want to put together a listener's episode of your stories to share with other people to encourage ecotourism, which we love. So please do that and send those stories to me at elasmospod@gmail.com. Okay, now on to this week's guest. He comes from the luscious land of Florida, where he earned his bachelor's from UF, then was drawn up to the drastically different Alaskan climate and landscape for salmon research. He's nearing the final stages of his PhD work through the University of Alaska as he works in the warm Bahamas, managing the Bimini Shark Lab as president and CEO. Our guest this week is Matt Smukall, and though I focus a lot on him and his work, we also talk about the lab and its founder, Dr. Samuel Gruber, who everybody called Doc. Doc established the Bimini Shark Lab in the Bahamas in 1990 and led the way for shark research, setting a golden example for intentionality, collaboration, and a sense of fun. He sadly passed away in 2019, but his legacy is carried on in the Bahamas through his passionate successor, who generously spent an hour of his time talking with me about his work with tiger sharks, the Alaskan wilderness, Doc and the Bimini Shark Lab, super cool shark tracking technology, shark aging, very pregnant sharkies, how you can help and work with sharks, and bears? Wait, that can't be right. Hold on. Nope, we did in fact talk about bears. So buckle up everybody and meet the president and CEO of the Bimini Shark Lab, Matt Smukall. This is episode 5.
So my name is Matt Smukall. I'm the president at the Bimini Shark Lab. We're located on South Bimini, Bahamas, which is about 50 miles east of Miami, Florida. It's a small little island. It's actually the closest Bahamian island to the coast of Florida.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Just a hop and a skip away?
Yeah, with a lot of the big boats from Miami, you can be over here an hour and a half. Most of the time, it's actually faster to boat here than it is to fly. By the time you figure out,
really?
Checking in, checking in
That's true.
2 hours ahead of time, going through security, then your flight, getting a taxi here. Like you can basically leave Miami, and even in our boat, which is relatively slow, it's 2 hours for us.
Man, that's really not bad.
Most of the houses and condos here have a dock right out back, so you can basically just park right outside the house.
I don't know what you're picturing your Margaritaville to look like, but that's what I picture mine to look like. Just sitting on the dock, waiting for the neighbors to come by, What do you think Halloween's like? Do you think they show up on a boat, just come to each person's dock, and they just toss candy out into the boat? Now that'd be a dream come true. So, if you ever see me on a boat, just toss some candy at me, and I'll be a happy guy. So what is it that got you interested in science in the first place?
Actually, when I was, growing up, my mom's a science teacher. She did marine biology.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so she was kind of the science person in the family. But like most kids, I was interested in a bunch of different stuff. You'll talk to some people and they say, from the time they were like 8 years old, they knew they wanted to go shark science. Like mine was a bit more, of a zigzag path. Definitely something I was interested at like a very early age.
So Matt's mic cut out for this last part, and it cut out every now and then, but that's just because he's living on the beautiful Bahamian, or is it Bahamian? On this beautiful island in the Bahamas. But he says he toyed with a bunch of different ideas in college, thinking about engineering, going the veterinary track, or even building construction. But he said shark science kept reeling him back in, and eventually he got hooked. Was there something specific that brought you back that said, okay, shark science is what I want to do. I don't want to be an engineer. I want to study sharks.
It's twofold. It's the interest and, knowing that you get to spend time in the field, usually in the field studying things. But, as you advance in your career, you inevitably spend more time behind a computer. A lot of the stuff I was aerospace engineering, I was like, I really enjoy flying and things like that. But then I realized I was basically going to be designing things for other people to fly. So it's kind of one of those things of what I enjoy being able to do hands-on and getting involved with the science rather than, strictly sitting somewhere kind of working behind a desk.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I just finished up my bachelor's for marine biology, and so I've been thinking about going for a master's or even a PhD, and though like advancing in your career is like what you're supposed to do and what just naturally happens, it seems like it pushes you out of the hands-on activities, though you get more creativity with kind of designing your own experiments and figuring out what you want to study more. It seems like it pushes you out from that hands-on, either field work or laboratory experiments. And so that's made me question whether that's really the route that I want to take. Oh, and have you earned your PhD yet, or are you still working on it?
I've been finishing up my PhD for a few years. I'm in the writing phase, which takes quite a while. So slowly trying to churn out the last papers and chapters from my PhD. The data collection and everything like that's complete. Passed all my courses. It's just kind of
nice.
With everything going on at the lab and trying to design new research projects. Trying to work on writing from 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. every night. It's hard. You have to in the groove. At least I do. I like to be able to like in the groove with the writing and do an hour or two here or there. It really just breaks it up. Like I've been trying to find more time to sit down and just crank out the last 2 chapters.
Oh, absolutely. I'm the same way. I have to get into a groove to write. I just got out of college and I'm so glad I don't have to write any papers anymore. For now, anyway. Just wait until I go back to school. But that's not a concern of mine right now. But anyways, did you find it was difficult to make that decision to go on to your PhD, knowing how much you loved field work and how big a component desk work was for someone with their PhD?
Yeah, it's people, Shark Week especially, or, documentaries, it doesn't make for great TV to just film over someone's shoulder while they're spending like a month writing a grant proposal.
Not quite the same.
You spend a month putting together a plan to basically be able to spend 5 days in the field, try and do it. And then after your 5 days in the field, you spend a month, analyzing the data, another month writing up the publication, another month having to respond to reviewers or, resubmitting. And so it's a lot of other stuff that you don't necessarily think about, but
yeah, I bet.
Dr. Gruber, who founded the lab, basically like the way he looked at it and kind of taught us is like the field work's it's fun, but if you're not doing anything with that, if you're not publishing, if you're not getting that data out there, that final product, then you're kind of just playing around.
Remember, kids, the only difference between screwing around and science is writing it down.
Sometimes that's the fun parts of being able to go out on the water. That's what keeps you motivated during that next month of writing something. And then, so it's back and forth. You kind of have to make sure there's a balance there. Otherwise you'll get a bit burnt out.
Right. It gives you something to look forward to.
Well, this might just be for me, but for most, I would assume most researchers, those 5 days in the field are actually like our vacation. Like if I could, if I'm between like going on vacation or 5 days out in the field doing sharks research, I probably would, spend those 5 days in the field. That's like our most fun, enjoyable time. So that's really what kind of gets you through some of the other mundane desk type thing.
I mean, that's what I wish I could do on vacation, is just see sharks all the time. And you're in the Bahamas, so you get the best of both worlds. I mean, you really get it all down there when you think about it.
Yeah.
Now, so what exactly is your PhD focused on?
Mine's focusing on tiger shark ecology and movement around Bimini. So the Shark Lab's been studying here for basically 35 to 40 years, kind of on and off from some research vessels before Dr. Gruber established the lab. But then for the past 30 years, we've been here full time. So during that time, there's this huge plethora of data on tiger sharks. The Shark Lab, the Bimini Shark Lab, was kind of the bread and butter was lemon sharks for a long time, but there's a big diversity of species around here. So my PhD was actually analyzing some of the historical data, what our catch records are indicating, like what the population trend is doing, to get a better understanding of what the abundance of tiger sharks are in Bimini, but also kind of as an indication for the Bahamas as a whole. And then also looking at movement, so what's driving their movement, how far they're going, and then understanding some of the biological or physiological kind of constraints or factors that might be driving some of that movement we're seeing.
Oh, interesting. And that's awesome that the Bimini Shark Lab's been around so long, that there's just so much data on all these animals and their movements, and that you can use that for your research and to see how that's changed over time.
It's one of those, it's a very big blessing to be able to come into a place and already know that you have a huge data set in your back pocket, and then you start to add on to that. You're not starting from scratch.
Absolutely. That's got to be such a relief to see that there's already so much data that you're just kind of there to keep carrying on the projects and moving them in the direction that you want to go with them, all the while adding more data to that data set.
Yeah, and it's also great because there's so many other researchers that have been through the lab during that 30-year span. So you have this huge network of people that can give you advice, and even if it's just as simple as saying oh yeah, when I was there 20 years ago, this was the spot that we noticed, a bunch of sharks were at. You might want to check it out again. So just so much, just a small amount of advice here and there that can really and help you kind of jumpstart your project.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, what a great network of researchers and people to just help you out with everything that you're doing. So I'm not really sure how the Bimini Field Station works. Are you doing your PhD through the field station or through a university associated with the field station?
The way the Bimini Field Station works is we provide the facility and the field station boat support, but students from all around will come here and study. So my university is University of Alaska, Fairbanks.
Geez, that's a ways away from the Bahamas.
Yeah. It's a long story. I grew up in Florida, did my undergrad at University of Florida, did my master's at University of Florida.
Matt said he then moved up to Alaska, where he began
studying salmon. And, it was supposed to be a summer internship, a one summer thing, and ended up turning into 5 or 6 years. I was up there because it was fun, growing up in Florida. And then I went up there, my job was basically spending the summer flying in boat planes and helicopters all around the wilderness doing research. So it was...
Oh my God, I can't believe you left that.
Yeah. But I knew I wanted to come back and do things, in more tropical environment. So, but I was able to do it was 6 years ago. I started, when I first enrolled in my PhD, and it was actually probably one of the first kind of like distance programs for college. Now with the pandemic, everybody basically has a distance program, but when I was able to do it, I forget what it was even called because I don't even know if we had Zoom. And we basically using like a video conferencing thing, and I would video conference in from Bimini to my class in Fairbanks.
Matt said he was working remotely before working remote was even cool. And I couldn't agree more. Like, we think we're all fancy and modern and so high tech because we've been doing this for the past 2 years. But come on. He's been doing this for the past, 8.
I'd be able to, do my coursework here, do all my classes here, and then, the next day be out in the field doing research and things like that. That's why I was able to get a lot done.
Well, that's just efficiency at its finest right there. And it's so cool you've gotten to do so much in Alaska. I've always wanted to go. It sounds really, really beautiful. And then on top of all that, to get to do really cool research, that's my dream.
Yeah, it's just a very different, it's just so much different. That's what kind of kept me. It was, fun exploring, doing different stuff up there.
And other than being everyone's dream place to be constantly, how did you first make it to the Bahamas and Bimini?
I found it. There's like conservation volunteer kind of listserv, or websites that list all these things. I had seen it a couple times on Shark Week or other documentaries. Just looking for kind of volunteer opportunities to get more hands-on experience. Bimini kept coming up, so I knew I wanted to come down here.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I keep finding it pop up just throughout, my Instagram feed or something like that. And one of the things that really pops up a lot is Dr. Gruber. And so if you could, how would you describe Dr. Gruber in just a few short sentences about his impact on you and the volunteers in the field station at Bimini and just his impact on shark research in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put it into a couple sentences, but his reach with shark research, it's literally global. The number of students that he's mentored and have come through Bimini and now moved on to other, prominent positions, whether it's as a professor or lead researcher somewhere, but they're all around the world. And, that's kind of like his biggest legacy is being able to train and teach the next generation of shark scientists. And then that's what he did for me and for all the other students that came through the Shark Lab.
That's really important. I mean, that's such a skill. And it sounds like he had a knack for it. Now, do you know how you were chosen to be his successor as president of the Bimini Shark Lab?
So, that was a long process. I came in 2012 and I volunteered. I volunteered at the lab, I think 3 different stints. I would take time off in the winter when I was working in Alaska and come down here because, Bimini's a great spot to warm up. I would visit my family in Florida, then come down to Bimini to volunteer. And then, during that time, I got to know Doc and talked to him about potential projects. And so I came back in 2015 or 16 to start my PhD. And so I started my PhD, studying tiger sharks at that point.
So Matt's audio cut in and out a little bit here, but he told me about how he went home to his parents' house in Orlando, Florida, where he had to take his comprehensive exams for his PhD, which, talk about stressful. But he said he passed his comprehensive exams and he was emailing Doc to say, hey, I passed my exams, I can finally get grinding on my dissertation. And Doc wrote him back saying, great, you can finally take over the Shark Lab. And Matt said his response was just like, no, I'm supposed to be writing my dissertation and working on getting those chapters published. And he said the rest is history.
It happened pretty quickly. But you can't really say no to a dream opportunity like that. So that's why, for the past 3 years, since I've been back, it's been slow working at night, trying to, get those chapters out while also trying to do everything else that I need to do to oversee the lab. And it's, very big shoes to fill with Dr. Gruber.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can't even imagine. And so what are some of the responsibilities you have as president and CEO of the Shark Lab?
So the main thing is that just keeping the place running, so funding Funding's always a big thing for any nonprofit. So we're a U.S. nonprofit. We're also a Bahamian nonprofit.
It's Bahamian. Bahamian. Not Bahamian or Bahamanian. Bahamian. Remember that one for trivia night.
So making sure all of our paperwork is in order, making sure that we're funded so that students have the opportunity to come down here and do research, writing grant proposals to try to keep the research going, reaching out to potential, donations, things like that. Just kind of overall general oversight of the lab with the organization and the team there, making sure that things stay on track. Yeah, helping a little bit with some teaching for some of the college courses that we do, things like that. Yeah, so every day is a bit different. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, for real. And then you're working on your PhD.
Yeah, that's why, for the better part of 2 years, I kind of just put the PhD on the shelf and, tried to settle into the new job. And fortunately, my committee, I was ahead in the timeline with my PhD. So my committee it happens pretty frequently that's one of the things is it happens pretty frequently with people in their PhD is you're always kind of looking for that job after you start to have one foot out the door and you might get a job offer and then you completely dive into that new job, that you might get and you're kind of still being pulled to finish the PhD, but it's hard when you're like full into a career. So.
Okay, can you just imagine for a second? I don't even know where to start. How do you even try to comprehend finishing your PhD and starting a new job and successfully running a shark lab? Like, that's so cool, but also an incredibly daunting task, but he seems to be pretty calm about it. So he must be doing something right. So moving away from the stress that comes with overwhelming life circumstances, how did Matt decide to do his research on tiger sharks? Listen up.
They're kind of, the lab had always focused on lemon sharks because of a few reasons, that they're kind of like this, what you can use as like a focal species to inform about some other species.
It's me again. Hey, remember last episode with Dr. Chris Lowe when we talked about model species? This is what he's talking about right here. Lemon sharks act as a good model species or representative to just get an idea of how sharks behave. But if you want a more detailed explanation, you should go back and listen because why not? And it's fantastic.
We would never really be able to put like a mako shark into a semi-captive pen and observe it like the same way we would with a lemon shark. But tiger sharks then come in because there might be like the next step up. So tiger sharks are plentiful around Bimini. We can work with them relatively easily. We know they're very hardy. So using them also as a model species because they're circumglobal, they're all around the world. So if we can start to understand some of the characteristics of biology and patterns of tiger sharks here in the Bahamas, then we might be able to kind of use those lessons to inform about what role they might play in the ecosystem or some of their movements and type of management that we need for them in other areas around the world, or with other species that might have that similar kind of life history traits as a tiger shark. They're big, long-lived, move big areas. So kind of using it as an opportunity to inform about not just Bimini, but like the broader shark research.
Oh, definitely. And since they're found around the world, are they a highly migratory species?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question. Sometimes in a technical term, depending where you're looking, migration is almost something that you would think about as like a predictable movement. Right. Some of the best known migrations, if you think about wildebeest migration, you would, and you wanted to film it, you'd basically be able to like say, the wildebeest are going to be in this area this time of year, kind of moving this direction. And, you can go out on your safari and get in front of it and things like that. Yeah. Tiger sharks aren't, and most sharks really aren't necessarily migratory in the same way like that. Okay. Some are, but they're, at least tiger sharks, they basically do what they want. It's very hard to predict. It's hard to predict what they're going to do, and what they do one year might not match up with the second year. So you would more characterize them as like highly mobile. They cover a very big area, but it's hard to necessarily say that they're having migrations. But that's just a technical kind of. They go very far.
Oh, I gotcha. So they're highly mobile, not necessarily highly migratory. That's a good distinction I didn't really recognize. And since they're found all over the world, are some populations of the tiger shark species more mobile or migratory, quote unquote, I guess, than other populations found in different locations in the world?
Yeah, a lot of it also depends on the individuals too. So, we'll have individuals that we track here in Bimini with satellite tags, and they might hang around Bimini very close, like within, 30 miles of Bimini all year long. And then we have other ones that we've tagged, same size, both of them are female, relatively same, age class, probably similar reproductive cycle. And one of them travels 8,000 miles in a year and the other one stays kind of at home.
Sweet mother of God, that's an incredible distance. Can you even imagine? I can barely swim the length of the pool, much less swim a marathon every single day for an entire year. But I guess they really take Dory's advice to heart.
Hey, Mr. Grumpy Gills. When life gets you down, you know what you gotta do?
I don't want to know what you gotta do.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
Now that I listen to that when I'm older and after I've gone through my own mental health struggles, that's just good life advice. Not just for the tiger sharks. So just keep swimming, elasmites. Okay, now back to Matt talking about the variability of tiger shark movement patterns.
So we don't fully understand that part of it. One of my colleagues, Dr. Felici now, she just got her doctorate a couple months ago, and she was doing her work while I was at the Shark Lab as well. And a lot of her stuff looked at behavior and kind of personality differences in sharks. And she was looking at it with lemon sharks, but that's the same type of thing where if you can look at it with a focal species, you assume that what you're maybe seeing with them could be extrapolated out to other species. So like a behavioral and personality component with tiger sharks that even though they're both, big mature females and we put a satellite tag, there could be one of them just has more behavioral, for whatever reason, constraint that wants to say like a homebody.
Yeah, I get that. I love my home. But maybe that's just the sharks saying that they don't want to be put into a box, that they don't want to be put into this binary system that we've created or something like that.
We, I think, always try to put them into a box and say, yes, they're migratory. And we try to use like very basic words to describe it. There's a huge variation in the behavior and movement.
Yeah, especially for such a large and variable animal. And how big can tiger sharks get?
In our area, basically around like 4.5 meters, right at 14 feet. Yeah, they'll get a little bit bigger in the Pacific Ocean, but in the Atlantic in general, right around 14 feet.
Wow, that's a big fish. And is their size dependent on resources? So is that why they might be bigger in the Pacific, or are they just generally bigger for whatever reason?
It's just a general trait for a lot of sharks that they'll actually get bigger there. It could be genetic components and things like that, but it just in general in that ocean basin, a lot of the species will get bigger.
That's really interesting. So how do you track the tiger sharks?
It's a combination of things. We have some of our sharks are tagged with what we call an acoustic transmitter.
And if you flip back to chapter 4 in your Elasmos podcast, A Shark's Universe history book, you'll find that we chatted about these acoustic tags with Dr. Chris Lowe.
And it's a small little tag that it has a unique serial number, and it'll actually send out a ping around every 2 minutes. And then we have these underwater receivers that they're, we call them like listening stations around Bimini, and we have 65 of them. And so that receiver or the tracking transmitter in the shark, when it sends out that ping, if there's a tracking receiver within roughly like 1,000 feet of that shark, it'll be able to pick it up. So it can't go super far. So the sharks do need to be like relatively close proximity to one of those receivers. And then it'll pick up that detection and it'll tell you, this serial number was in range of this receiver at this time, and every 2 minutes it'll ping. So you can actually see how long that shark is in that habitat. Or because we have, these receivers all around the island, we could actually be like, at this time, it was at this receiver. 2 minutes later, it was at this next receiver. 2 minutes later, it was at this next receiver, and actually start to piece together kind of the movement path, not just which one they were at. But that can also allow you to then, like, you know, look at things like what season are they picked up on our receivers the most time? Like, when are we getting the most detections? What time of day? You know, how does that change, you know, across multiple years? Are the same ones coming back? Then are they out of the receiver range for a few months and then they come back again? Stuff like that. And so those are what we call the acoustic tracking tags.
Yeah.
And those work great for, you know, close proximity to the island, because the shark doesn't have to come to the surface. As long as that tag is pinging, and that tag can last up to 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah. So they have these battery, depending on the battery, you know, it'll be able to ping for around 10 years.
Now that's freaking sweet. I mean, you could still be tracking a shark from 2012. And how big are these tags? I mean, they must not be big if the sharks are able to swim with them for 10 years. I mean, that's a long time to have something attached to your body.
They're like maybe half the size of a cigar. You know, they're not big. So, you know, technology is always advancing and getting better. And then there's also a huge network of those similar receivers that are all, you know, throughout the Gulf of Mexico, throughout the Bahamas, the East Coast of the United States. So, like, if our shark from Bimini went up to North Carolina, and somebody in North Carolina might be studying, you know, sandbar sharks or sand tiger sharks there, but they have those same type of receivers at same company, our shark would be picked up on those receivers. And then all of a sudden we get a detection, you know, and it happens all the time. Like, somebody from a university in North Carolina will say, hey, we picked up, you know, this serial number, because there's no two that are the same. So there's this huge database with collaboration, and they'll say, like, yeah, you know, we picked up your animal on these days. It was here for this long, stuff like that. So it's a great way that we can a lot of scientists can collaborate and work together to get that information.
Yeah, that's really awesome. The collaboration part of that is really cool, because then it's got to make you feel less restrained to your area, to just around Bimini, so that you can now, yeah, like you said, track sharks as they move up the eastern coast or something that have also been to Bimini. And you can see where they move throughout their long journeys and track their movements. So that's really cool that you can collaborate on all this.
Yeah, and, you know, like, for us at the Bimini Shark Lab, we would never just randomly put a receiver out in North Carolina, hoping, you know, but because everybody's working together, you have your local small projects, but then you can also, like, do it as a regional type thing.
And does the transmitter data get more difficult to collect and to work with when the sharks move off the coast? So more into open ocean, I would assume, away from the transmitters?
Yeah, so, you know, these receivers, the acoustic receivers, we have them, the deepest ones are around 100 feet, because you actually have to go out and physically retrieve the receiver to download it to your computer. And so we do that twice a year. So you can imagine you're very constrained to, like, what's accessible for you to retrieve them. That's one of the big limitations. So, like, from Bimini to the east coast of Florida, there's basically no coverage. You know, unless you were, like, right on the coast of Florida, but there's this huge gap of, you know, 45, maybe 48 miles that there is nothing there. So if our shark, it's cruising anywhere in between there, we don't know where it is. And that's where the satellite transmitter tags come in.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah, those are the ones that are fixed to the dorsal fin. And if that shark comes to the surface, it'll start sending out data to the satellite. And that's, you know, so you can use two different types of tracking tags to kind of piece together the things separately.
Oh, so the satellite tags are the ones on the dorsal fin. So does that mean that the acoustic tags are internal, or are they attached somewhere else on the body on the outside?
You can do them both. You can do either way. We do most of ours internal now, just so that they can be retained for 10 years.
And so is tracker longevity being tested on tiger sharks? Because can't tiger sharks live longer than 10 years? So I looked this up because I was embarrassed I didn't know when I asked it, but tiger sharks can live to be around 20 to 30 years old. And that's pretty long, but not super uncommon for elasmobranchs, aka our favorites, sharks, skates, rays, and sawfishes. Back to the question, are they testing how long the trackers can last on tiger sharks? Okay, here he is.
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of this technology, we're kind of not really positive how, like, even 10 years ago, not a ton of people were putting these acoustic tags out in sharks. So like a lot of people are putting them out now over the past, 5 to 8 years or whatever. And the technology has improved a lot to now give you 10 years, but we haven't even really reached the full capacity of when those tags would expire, just because they are relatively, in the broad scheme of shark research, it's one of the newer things that tracking's been going on for a long time, but it's a lot more popular now than it was maybe a decade ago.
It is crazy to think how little time there's been for this technology and how advanced it already is. And so now just thinking about how far it'll be in like a decade from now, that's just crazy. It could be really revolutionary compared to what we're at today.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like any technology, as the batteries get smaller and improve, then, they can keep having longer and longer lives for these tags. And, that's probably one of the ways that we're going to actually end up knowing how long sharks live, is you're going to keep being like, wow, this shark was X feet long when we tagged it. And we estimate she was, 15 years old when we tagged her, and she's been pinging for 20 years or something like that. And that's happened here in Bimini, where, we know from some of the sharks, like how old they estimated to be when they've been tagged, and they're still going strong, 6 or 7 years later.
God, that's incredible. I mean, that's so cool that you could figure out their age from all of that. And how old is the oldest shark that you've seen around Bimini?
There's one lemon shark. I think she's probably like 36 this year. So
no way.
So that was a combination of Shark Lab did a project that's a combination of genetics to pick up her offspring. So knowing that she was definitely mature, like in a certain year, and then being able to track her after that with the tracking tag. So we know she's still alive based on picking up her movements.
God, that's crazy. She's been alive for that long.
Yeah. That was a lot longer than what was expected for lemon sharks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know much about lemon sharks, but I assumed that they were a lot shorter lived. I thought that they were more in the 10 to 15 year range.
No, most sharks are way longer than that.
Really?
Most of them, lemon sharks, don't even really reach maturity until 12 to 14 years old.
No way. Wow, That takes a long time.
Yeah, so that's one of the problems. That's why it's so hard to manage them. Is it takes them a very long time to reach maturity and rebound from fishing pressure and things like that.
Is there a lot of fishing pressure on them? I guess specifically within the Bahamas?
So the Bahamas is a shark sanctuary, which means, at least that's in awesome. Theory, you're not even supposed to try to go out and catch and release sharks. You're not supposed to be able to catch sharks. You're not supposed to be able to land sharks. You're not supposed to catch and release them, have any shark products in the Bahamas. It's a huge swath of ocean to try to patrol. So, enforcement is always another thing. But yeah, the Bahamas is one of the shark sanctuaries, and it's kind of a spot that other areas are looking to kind of, see the viability of implementing the similar type of management.
So just like how scientists and researchers use certain animals to be model species for a bunch of other species that are a lot harder to either collect or handle or for whatever reason work with, governments and countries also use policies and conservation or management plans from other countries or governments as a model for how they want to implement something. So other governments and countries should look at the Bahamas as a model for future wildlife protection plans.
Yeah, this is the 10-year anniversary. 2011 was when it was established.
Oh, no way. That's awesome. Is there like a parade for it or anything at Bimini?
I don't know. I think that if there was one planned, I'm sure they've canceled it for this year at least, so we can get
That's
COVID under control. So,
well, yeah, that makes sense. And I've always wondered this, and this is probably just a stupid question, but it just always piques my curiosity. Are tiger sharks social animals?
Not necessarily social. They might come to a similar prey source. So I know there's been drone videos out there of, say there was a whale carcass or something like that. That could be one way that they're coming to a similar prey source. Or sometimes the turtle nesting beaches at a certain time of year, there might be like multiple tiger sharks drawn into an area, but they're not necessarily social in the same way that they're hanging out together to they're not hunting in packs. They're not like, forming schools that fish the same way fish do or anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And your research also focuses on the body condition of tiger sharks. What does that mean exactly?
So one of the things that we want to look at is, in a simple way is to put it in human terms. Like if you're going to go on a hike across the country, you have to be in pretty good physical state for it. Or even, even if you think about juvenile and baby sharks, the ones that are going to be able to like survive in the wild and those are the ones that they probably they're in slightly better condition, like physiologically. They might have higher energy reserves, might be able to grow a little bit faster so that they can outcompete some of their siblings, or even like if they grow faster, they're not as vulnerable to other predators in the area. And so looking at body condition is one way that we can get an indication of kind of how healthy they are, but not necessarily, what does that actually mean for, the rest of their life. So body condition very simply used to be measured as either like a kind of a ratio of weight to length or of like length to girth. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of differences and, slight differences in overall kind of, even though all tiger sharks somewhat look alike, there are minor differences in morphology, and one might just be naturally kind of girthier than another one. But does that necessarily mean like they're in better physiological health?
That sounds a lot like BMI for humans, where it's just measurements of your height and your weight, and then that's used to categorize whether you're overweight, underweight, or right in the middle. But it's not necessarily an accurate determinant for how healthy you are overall.
Not always. The same way that like, if you wanted to know if your dog was healthy, you wouldn't just take it to the vet and they weigh it and be like, oh yeah, he's 65 pounds. That's the end of that. They might do like a bit more analysis, maybe do a blood draw to look at some of, what's going on physiologically and stuff with them. And so that's similar to what we're doing with tiger sharks to better understand how their actual like overall body health and energy reserves changes across the season, but also again across like different age classes, and potentially how would that impact like their survival ability or even reproduction.
Yeah, are there any thoughts or ideas about how their body condition changes throughout reproduction, both male and female?
Yeah, so, for females, it's definitely a huge energetically taxing event, just like it is for, for any female, basically, of any species. It's, but with tiger sharks, they can have up to 80 pups.
Oh my God. Is that just one litter?
It's probably like averages 40 to 50 in the litter, but, she could potentially have up to 80. And they're born at, maybe like 2 to 2.5 feet long.
Whew, the rabbit hole I just went down. Okay, so baby tiger sharks can weigh between 6 and 13 pounds when they're born. And so if there's 80 of them, that mom is carrying essentially 80 human-sized babies.
Hey, oh, you scared me, Jesus! Oh,
So that's a lot of just calories to be able to, create those offspring. So it's definitely an energetically taxing event for her. And typically they'll reproduce 1 year, then take a year off just so their body can kind of recover, recoup that condition that they need to. And then if they're in good enough condition, they'll probably reproduce, so they'll have like a break year and then they'll reproduce again after that. So we know that it's a very taxing type of event for the females. The males, it's not so bad.
Classic.
They're just mating, providing sperm. That's about it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And so is there a specific mating season when they are mating?
Yeah, we think, it might be summer to kind of late summer and into the fall is when, based on what we call like mating scars. Sharks obviously don't have hands, so the only way for the male to kind of hold on to the female during copulation is to actually, he'll bite onto her and like either bite onto her pec fins or, onto her side, and that's how they hold in place. And so, that can be pretty rough, but you can also see those scratch marks and those cuts then sometimes on the big females that we we catch, and that's a good indication of, that they've been mating recently.
Do they have is immune system the right word, to where that scarring can heal up pretty well?
Yeah, they'll heal very quickly with that. Yeah,
I mean, I've heard sharks have just an incredible immune system.
Yeah, some people assume that they never get sick or anything. We know that there has to be some sort of natural thing that, otherwise, a big tiger shark, what's really natural mortality going to come from? So there is something, they don't live forever.
Right.
But they do have they're very hardy. They have very good immune systems. They can recover pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that mama tiger sharks have an average 40 to 50 pups. Do you know what the survival rate is for all those babies?
Probably depends on the area, but it's usually around 50% are going to survive that first year. It's a very, basically half of them are going to be eaten or killed or not have the energy to survive. And, that's probably part of the reason why, evolutionary wise, they do have quite a few pups.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are the pups ever cannibals? Do they ever eat each other?
Yeah, they can be. Yeah. Yeah, it's a shark eat shark world. So.
Yeah, I figured it's kind of, you gotta eat what's out there, and if you can only see your brothers and sisters, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say from the human perspective, but in the wild, what you gonna do, So is there a tiger shark nursery around Bimini for these little pups to grow up in?
It's not the same type of nursery as maybe for some other sharks, lemon sharks here in Bimini, they'll hang out in the lagoon very close to the mangroves, things like that, and that's kind of their nursery area. Even bull sharks in some of the estuaries or something like that, they'll be very, very in the backwater areas as a nursery ground. The top tier are born in pretty open habitat where there's a lot of other predators around. I've had newborn, 2 to 3 month old tiger sharks that have moved from Bimini to Florida. So they'll move around quite a bit. Yeah. They'll move around quite a bit. It's not a clear to find nursery that you can go and see all the babies at.
That's wild. I mean, they just, right from the get-go, they skip the crawling phase, they skip the walking phase, and they just move straight on to running marathons. I mean, that's wild for a newborn. And so since they don't have that kind of nursery protection that the lemon sharks do with the mangroves or the bulls have with the estuaries, do they form any kind of social grouping to have strengthened numbers as pups?
Not with the tiger sharks, with some of the other species. So for lemon, that will happen. For the tiger sharks, they're kind of more solitary unless there's a major food source that they're all attracted to.
I don't know why. That just seems so strange to me. I mean, I would just think, obviously something worked because millions of years later, they're thriving. They're at the top of the food chain, but I don't know. It just seems counterintuitive. Why wouldn't you want the help from others? But I guess tiger sharks are really just true introverts. But it sounds like they're born explorers.
Pretty much. They have a very broad diet. They can handle a bunch of different types of habitat, and they'll use a lot of different resources that they can. So they're very flexible with what they're doing.
Oh, okay. And so how are tiger sharks doing just as a species? I'm not really sure how they stand, if they're endangered or threatened, or if they're doing fine. I'm not really sure. Do you know how they're doing? Have you asked them lately?
Right now, tiger sharks are actually listed as near threatened. They're very stable in the area around here.
That's good.
And that's one of the parts of my PhD was actually looking at, what the population, kind of the local population abundance around Bimini has done for the past 35 years. And we know that it's been relatively stable. So sometimes you'll hear a rumor that, sharks are booming out of control after the shark sanctuary and things. And that's not necessarily true. All of our surveys indicate that it's relatively stable. They're kind of holding what could kind of be considered maybe carrying capacity right now for it, but they're not just booming out of control, prowling on our beaches or anything like that.
Oh, carrying capacity, you sweet, sweet ecological gem of jargon and science. So many of us have probably heard the term carrying capacity, but we might not know what it means. And I struggled with this a lot when I was taking classes within marine biology, so don't worry if you don't know. It's just the maximum number of animals or organisms that can occupy a certain ecosystem without environmental degradation. So it's really just how many animals can this ecosystem support without the ecosystem flatlining. So what Matt's talking about here with the shark populations around Bimini being stable for a while, that means that they're probably around carrying capacity, because usually if they're below carrying capacity, the populations are still growing, and if they're above carrying capacity, then the populations usually decline. So if they're stable, they're probably hovering right around that maximum amount of sharks that can occupy that ecosystem. So hopefully that clears up some jargon for you. And do you remember what we were talking about? Oh yeah, how are tiger sharks doing overall? I feel like it's hard for species like tiger sharks that are found worldwide. I feel like that's difficult to put them in their box, you know? Again, putting something in its box of whether it's endangered or threatened or stable. Because it might be doing okay for, I don't know, in the Eastern Pacific, but it might be threatened in the Northern Atlantic. Though I recognize the need to categorize it as either threatened, endangered, or stable, it seems like we're just trying to put it back in its box.
Right, absolutely. And because they cover so much ground, it kind of works both ways where, you know, because they cover so much ground, like the Bahamas and sharks from here might be able to swim to another area, and they're actually going to now be vulnerable to like the fisheries that might be in, a couple 100 miles south of us, or, somewhere else that they might not be protected by the sanctuary. But also on the other hand, if those other areas are protected, then some of the sharks from the Bahamas might be swimming down there and kind of start repopulating those areas too.
Yeah.
So it can be like hard to manage because they cover such vast areas.
Right. And I guess is that where more international and intergovernmental policies or restrictions come into play?
Yeah. So that's where, being able to do regional stock assessments and working like, inter-country and across jurisdiction lines is going to be the best way for those, really mobile sharks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so now I kind of want to get into like how anyone can help sharks, So as an aspiring marine biologist and hopefully someday shark researcher extraordinaire or whatever, I really am interested in opportunities for people to grow and learn. And so I've looked into the Bimini Field Station and seen some of the opportunities that y'all offer, but could you elaborate on those a little bit more?
So at the field station, we have college courses that come down here, and they'll spend a week learning about the local ecosystem, about the local sharks, about the research that we do. We also have what are called research experiences, and that's where maybe people that aren't enrolled in those actual colleges, they get to come down and spend a week with us. A lot of times people actually take time off of work. They might be a lawyer or engineer or, business person. And they just said, I've always wanted to be like a marine biologist. I wonder what it'd be like to go do that for a week. And so they come down and they spend a week with us learning about all the research, environmental stuff, conservation efforts that we're doing. But also there's a lot of stuff that, not everyone has the ability or time, in today's there's a ton of ways from home, their choices, how they support, how they're voting, kind of petitions, and, just being engaged and informed about what's going on.
So like Matt said, these opportunities actually at the Bimini Field Station may not be accessible economically to everyone. But oftentimes schools and organizations will offer scholarships for things like this so that you can get the hands-on experience that you're looking for. And the Bimini Field Station actually offers scholarships for Bahamians. So that's a great thing they do for locals.
Our main goal is we're here to provide the information and not force our beliefs on anyone, but like provide, the information for people to kind of make informed decisions and think, governments and companies and stuff, they're listening to the constituents. Sometimes the customer base has more of a vocal voice than the scientists do.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy, but it's just how the world works. Okay, and so last few questions that I always love to ask. I know this world just freaking sucks sometimes, but what gets you out of bed every day and keeps you motivated? What is it that excites you and puts a smile on your face while doing what you do?
I mean, so one of the things with shark research and conservation is there are really good, bright success stories of species that are coming back and areas that are being really well managed. So, like the East Coast of the United States has probably one of the strictest or more strenuously managed shark fisheries kind of in the world, and so they've had this balance of having commercial shark fisheries with the conservation aspect, trying to bring back certain species, protect certain species. And it's been successful for a lot of species. And there's indications that, several species along the East Coast of the US are rebounding, or maybe they weren't as imperiled as we initially thought. There are still a lot of work to do there there are certain other species that still need conservation effort, but I think it's a lot more beneficial to highlight like some of those success stories, because then it shows, whether it's talking to fishermen or engaging different stakeholder groups, it shows them that like the hard work can pay off and the sacrifices from like each group and, dedication can pay off. And, in the long run, the whole point is to make sure that these species are around for the future.
Yeah, and that's gotta be, as a shark scientist, great to hear these success stories that like your research is helping implement these plans that are actually working and helping bring back these species that were in decline.
Yeah. And, nobody likes to hear that the, sky's falling and the world's ending all the time. It just wears people out.
For real, just turn on the news and it will turn your hair gray. So do you have any future goals within the world of marine science?
For myself, just to make sure that the lab's around for another 30 years, so that's a big goal.
Yeah, no, those are some big shoes to fill, but I mean, it sounds like he left you in great hands and he picked the right person for the job. And with all the tradition that the Bimini Field Station has, it seems like that there's just such a great network and group of people that care. And I think that's really important in keeping the organization alive and going strong.
Yeah, it's great to have that network and, such a base of people that want to help out.
All right, now for the really fun questions. But okay, they're also really hard. What's your favorite marine animal? Or actually, what's your favorite just animal in general?
I mean, bears bears were one of the reasons I went up to Alaska, just being able to see brown bears in the wild. That was always pretty amazing.
Ooh, that's awesome. Did you get to see any grizzlies too?
Yeah, so we had browns on the, brown bears on the coast and then grizzlies on the interior. And then there's also black bears everywhere, basically.
Oh, that's so cool. Did you ever have any encounters with any of them?
It was close. We were doing salmon research, so the bears were there looking for the salmon.
That's good. Yeah, you're still here, so.
Yeah.
Okay, and then kind of the same question, but if you could be any animal, what would you be and why?
Probably want to be my dog. So, I mean, he has a pretty good life. He gets to hang around on the beach all day, just go out on his chair on the balcony. He goes swimming in the ocean when he feels like it. He goes to work with me anytime he wants. So he has a pretty luxurious life.
So pretty much just your life without any responsibility?
Without a care in the
pretty
world.
much, yeah.
That's the dream for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
So now we can all say a big thank you to our new shark friend, Matt Smukall, for feeding us such awesomely interesting facts and information. You can find the Bimini Shark Lab online at biminisharklab.com, and they're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Bimini Shark Lab. I follow them, and they post great content with frequent updates on their research and conservation projects, and they also post about different opportunities to get involved. Thank you to all you Patreon donors out there supporting this podcast. You make it possible for me to keep chatting with great, wonderful people like Matt to bring our conversations straight to you. And you can give on Patreon at patreon.com/elasmospod and get some fun bonus content and opportunities to interact more with me and this podcast if you become a donor. So again, that's patreon.com/elasmospod. And also don't forget to rate and review this podcast and send your rating and review to me at elasmospod@gmail.com to try to win a fun little prize from our guests from episode 1. And remember, you can share this podcast on social media for 2 extra entries into the drawing if you tag us. You can find this podcast on Instagram and Twitter at ElasmosPod, and our Facebook page is called The Elasmos Podcast, A Shark's Universe. Our website is elasmospod.com, and it was professionally created by the one and only Paul McNeely. And don't forget to send in your diving, snorkeling, and adventure stories to elasmospod@gmail.com to have your story told on our listeners episode. And like I've said in past episodes, I'm going to try to get a YouTube channel together just as another platform for this podcast to get out there. It'll probably just start with some images, and then hopefully someday we'll be able to get interviews in person and maybe be able to film them. And wouldn't we all love that? Human interaction, face to face. Wow, that is what we need more than ever. But not only will COVID going away solve that, but also your support again through Patreon, because that's how I can get things done and do everything for your benefit. And mine too, because I really enjoy this. This is a lot of fun. The theme song is performed by Connor Blake and Wes McNeely. You can find Wes on Instagram at wes.mcneely1 and on YouTube at Wes McNeely. I'm also on Instagram at smcneely4335. And now that you've listened through the credits, on to my weekly update. So I've recently been getting really into reading, and I finished Harry Potter a few months ago, and it was so good. I still haven't seen the movies yet, so Harry Potter fans, don't hate too much. I want to, I just haven't gotten around to it. There's a lot of them. I just need to make the time. I just need to commit. Even though I definitely don't support what J.K. Rowling has said about transgender folks. But so I've also just finished a book called The Wave by Susan Casey, and she also has a really good book out called Voices in the Ocean, and it's about dolphins, and it's very sad, but it's very informative, which is what we're about here. But now, I'm finally on to this new book that I've been getting into. I've been really getting into fiction lately, and this one is called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, I think is how you say it. But it's really good. Oh, if anyone has any suggestions after I finish this, please let me know. Because now I'm always on the lookout for my next read. But The Midnight Library is so good. It's so dark, but it's so interesting that you just have to keep reading. It's like that car crash analogy or the squishing a spider. You just have to see it. You can't look away. It's a really big mind bender about like multiverses and getting lost in quantum physics. It's not about quantum physics. There's no math. But it's about alternative realities. Oh, it's so interesting. Clearly, I need to talk about this with someone who's also read it. So, if you have, let me know. Let's have a conversation about alternative universes and sharks. Or skates, raisins, sawfishes, okay. Alright, Elasmites, thanks again for tuning in. Stay safe and healthy out there in this crazy world. I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Elasmos Podcast. Later, skaters.